Do you think that the Peranakan culture gets enough of an airing, or has it been kept sort of suppressed like a little secret? We're familiar with the food and some of the aspects, but not a lot of it. No? There's a lot of questions.
The concept of Peranakan was basically dominated social set in Singapore and Malaya in the 18th and 19th century, right? I mean, to a point where the Peranakans, if you were seen as being sort of rich or wealthy or well-educated or in the upper strata of society, if you were Peranakan, that would not be the case if you were identified as being China-born. That was always the case. That was the case right up to World War II. And after World War II, with the independence movements, that is when it began to switch. It happened for different reasons. I won't get into that now. But essentially, I think politically it was more expedient, particularly for Chinese dominant sort of areas like Singapore, for political parties to identify their base. And so what you find was that political parties found it convenient to not identify as Peranakan, even if they were as politicians, but identify as Chinese. So you find from the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s onwards, right up to maybe the last 20 years, where this Peranakan element is pushed into the background. And so basically people like Monica, people like Norman, all of us, including me, we all basically lived through this period. But realizing there was something, they came from they came from a particular background, but they weren't really recognized because they were subsumed into a group which they didn't quite really belong to culturally. Because all of a sudden, the Peranakans were identified as being Chinese. Because you remember, after the 1950s and 60s, you began to have this concept of CMIO, which is Chinese, Malay, Indian, and others. In Malaysia, it's Malay, MCIO, Malay, Chinese, Indian, and others. So if you didn't fit into one, you had to fit into one of those categories. And many of the people who are leading this country, and even they still are, if you look at our government, most of them are from Peranakan backgrounds, but they don't identify as Peranakan. And they do it for a reason. It's not a bad thing. I'm not criticizing anybody. But when you look at the population of Singapore, Peranakans are in a minority. And so what you do is, if you're going to be Peranakan and you say, let me represent you as Chinese, they're not going to listen to you. The chances of them sort of not wanting to identify you is higher. So what you do is you de-emphasize the whole concept of Peranakan and you say everyone's Chinese. And that's how people like Monica fall into this little loophole in between where people say, what the hell are you? You're not supposed to be the way you are.
Yeah, in basically even growing up, I eat my fingers, fork and knife, fork and spoon. I grew up eating Western food, and going to a Chinese home, I was, I think, 9 years old, and they only served chopsticks. I couldn't eat. I waited and they thought I was being shy. So finally I whispered to the boy next to me and I said, do you have a fork and a spoon? And he said, oh yeah, we have a spoon now. So that's how different growing up, as a true blue Peranakan.
Kanan, that's quite an interesting question, because I get it very often when I get visitors in the media coming and asking me, is Peranakan culture dead, right? And my answer is actually quite simple. I says, we don't live like we did 100 years ago. We don't behave like we did 100 years ago. But neither do the Koreans and the Japanese and the Germans, right? So why should the Peranakans be stuck in a sarong kebaya, beating shoes the entire day and taking on a trishaw? So for me, it's a total opposite. For me, I believe that Peranakan culture is more alive today than it's ever been. The very fact that I'm not sure what time the other people are on, but to have 100 over people, and I see a lot of Angmo names asking questions or commenting and being interested in Peranakan culture, I think it says a lot. You take a stone, you throw out in Singapore, half the people out there would know what at least is Peranakan culture. STB, the tourism board, has done such a wonderful job that visitors to Singapore think the whole of Katong is
Yes.
filled with women walking in kabayas around, like as if it's some geisha Peranakan wonderland. But to me, I believe that we are enjoying a renaissance more than we have ever been. To even have for me the honor of having even Josh Groban visiting me when he visited Singapore, and I think that speaks a lot about the Peranakan culture.
So, Norman, when you were doing your research for your book and collecting all the jewelry, did you get a sense of were people giving you stuff because they were proud of it, or because they wanted to clear their wardrobes and closets?
Nobody has ever given me stuff. Okay, by the way, I'm jealous if you say yes.
I think people part with the jewelry for many reasons. One of the reasons is sometimes the next generation, they just tell the mother, don't leave me jewelry because this jewelry is so dated, I'm not going to wear them. So why not you encash it for me? That's why they sell it. And there are, other forms of jewelry like hairpins. How many of us in the modern day, the women will wear hairpins? So to them, it's like obsolete pieces of jewelry which nobody will wear anymore. So, they might part with pieces like that. Yeah. So there are many reasons. And also one of the reasons is that, people sometimes part, people also sometimes buy. So people buy to give to the next generation. Like, I've got a friend who don't have a nice set of croissants. So she looks for the croissant. So she said that I must leave an heirloom to my daughter. So, although she doesn't have an heirloom from her mother, but she feels that her daughter should deserve an heirloom. So people also buy pieces. So it's not only one-sided. And of recent years, Peranakan jewelry has become famous because the Queen of England is wearing it. Okay, our government has actually presented the Queen when she visited Singapore on her state visit, a new piece of Peranakan design diamond brooch. It's not the vintage one, it's newly made, but nevertheless, it's still a Peranakan design with the phoenix and all.
And she wears it quite often,
Yeah, she likes it.
Being photographed in a lot of the press conferences all around the world.
So most of the time people say, if it's good enough for the Queen, it's good enough for me.